Welcome to the Jolly and Sorcery Knowledge Series, made for smart business leaders who want to stay ahead of the competition using proven strategies. Each session, Jolly and Sorcery chat with an authority in a specific digital niche. From SEO to PR and beyond, these leaders reveal the tactics and mindsets that changed their game and could change yours. Without further ado, here's your host, Greg Heilers.
I'm Greg from Sorcery. We've got two experts here at Karl that I have had the fortune to work with. One for quite a while, Dan, Barbara from Jolly SEO, and I'd love each of you to introduce yourself right after this, and Kimberly, who we just crossed paths and is quite frankly right up to the second astounding me with these insights that you've got. So thank you both for coming today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my name's Dan. I'm kind of heading the sales and development side of Jolly. In my experience, I've sent, it's got to be nearly 3,000 pitches at this point. Somewhere kind of approaching 300 wins. And on the journalist side as well, I've published a few queries on Harrow as well. So hitting this from multiple angles, so I have a few different insights to share.
Yeah.
And hi, I'm Kimberly Perlin. I'm a mental health therapist. I've been in the field for like 20 years. I'm a trauma expert. And I started hitting Harrow because I simply didn't want to network. Like I just didn't want to do it. And I wanted to help my SEO. And I used to be an English and philosophy major. So I can write, like I know that. So, I actually did it as a procrastination method from not doing what a mastermind told me to do. And then I ended up being like really good at it. So I think I have about 150 like non-junk links. And that's in about 10 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, it's cute. It's like a new little superpower that I didn't know I have. And so I have other therapists or other professionals that contact me and I train them in like an hour or two. And like, look, this is how, because it's a game. Like there's certain things you can do to get yourself picked up more. And that's what I've sort of figured out.
Yeah, I'd love to start there with your experience, Kimberly, because this to me is a tactic that's so accessible, whether you come here for the SEO or for the PR. I really think that, we work in SEO daily, Dan and I, but even if we didn't, if we were a small business owner that wanted to put our name out there, like you started doing for yourself, it's an amazing medium. So I think, and can you correct me if you see it differently too, please, but I see two major barriers. Some people are concerned about time investment, right? And the other thing is they think I'm not good enough. Maybe the journalists won't even care what I have to say, or maybe I'm not a good enough writer. Or can you speak to any of those entry level?
First of all, there was a random 20-minute training on some private practice building site that I listened to, and I was like, oh, I can do that. And then I went on YouTube. And pretty much they give you the same advice. Like there's about 3 things. So it just wasn't rocket science, And then with the time element, what I would say is you kind of have to have a system, right? So like all the stuff you're going to tell the journalist, like, here's my backlink, here's my picture, here's my bio. Hey, by the way, if you're stuck on deadline and you need somebody with my expertise, here's how you can get a hold of me fast. I have that all like on a template. So I don't have to like reinvent the wheel. If I see a question and I like it and I don't have time to answer it, I put it in a draft with that template and I can just kick it out kind of anywhere. So that's sort of part of what I would say is that you kind of have to systemize it. You got to pick which ones am I only going to do it a couple times a week? What is the time I'm going to do it at? And you got to figure out a system that works. And that was sort of like the biggest thing to me. And then the other part of what I would say you have to systemize is to think about what other people say and don't say that. Because a lot of these questions are really 101 questions, right? And so that kind of also gets into the, do I know enough? Like if you knew 20% more than the average person, you can answer the darn question. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of topics like mental health. I like to do complex trauma, right? Can I talk about OCD? Sure. Am I an expert on it? No. But a lot of the questions they're sending me, I can totally answer, so that might be my second tier level of questions. My first tier is what is my expertise? What is the things that really light me up? I can hit those out really fast. But then I always have like another list of, if I have time or inclination, I'll answer those as well, and that just gives me different opportunities for backlinks, or just really, I think some of the journalists just want to make sure you're not psycho. So you have to answer a bunch of queries, and then they start picking you up a lot. You know what I mean? I've seen like people, they'll let my answers go the first couple times. And, but I'll mention every single time, oh, I've answered your questions before, blah, 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 and they'll start picking you up. Like when they see your name a couple times and they see your answers aren't insane, and those kinds of things.
Well, that's very reassuring for anybody watching this who's going to do it themselves, right? I hear that from numerous people. I see it, around Facebook groups. I hear it in conversations with people. There's all kinds of words for this, imposter syndrome, but some people just don't believe they know enough or they're good enough. And it's not the case with this medium, right? Maybe your first few pitches out into the ether are going to get eaten up, but
and like everybody has something to say about something, especially like if you're in a field. Like therapists, they always got something to say. You know what I mean? Like they just do. If you go in these therapy groups, they're always like declaring war on some kind of theory or something. So that's kind of easy, for us. But I would also say, like, even if it's not something you're an expert in, right? If it's something you're passionate about and you know a lot of information about, like, just jump on it. Like I for example, I am no COVID expert. They asked a question for parents who getting their kids vaccinated. Like, I could answer that.
You can answer that.
And I got in Forbes, which, still helps me with SEO, even though I'm not a therapist. Like I'm a therapist, I'm identified as a therapist in the article, but it's not necessarily about my expertise.
That's right. You can find these relevancy ways to add context to tie yourself in. That's for the DIY, let's say. But, Dan, you're here with Jolly, and I'm grateful for your time because I get to work with you and I've seen the tips you share. One of these tips, though, isn't the actual writing I'm curious about. What about for people watching this who are fellow SEOs, who are helping clients? And one common objection, I think, I've heard it many times. I'd be curious what you think about this is, what if our client says, how can I trust someone to represent me, in my business, my brand? I've got a future ahead of me. What does this look like as a managed service provider?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something I hear a lot. I think the first thing to kind of reassure people of is that when these pitches are sent out, they're not just in the ether, uncontrollable quotes that end up in who knows where, right? If you have these processes managed properly, you might have a journalist Rolodex whereby you know where the quotes are going and you can contact the journalist if perhaps they've misused a quote. Everything of this nature, preparing, and in the event that a quote is published that you don't like, you can reach out and say, I want this retracted. So I think a lot of this fear is coming from the fact that they feel like they're losing control over their image in some way. But one thing I find, something that Kimberly said earlier, kind of the quotes that these journalists are looking for are very kind of surface level. They already know what they want to say in an article. They're looking for a credible figurehead with which to say it. So by and large, as long as your quote is agreeable enough, and you have a suitable figurehead, like you're the CEO or you're the founder, anything of that nature, they're likely to pick you up. So yeah, I would say the first thing to say to a client who's on the fence about letting someone manage his brand is to first of all understand the nature of Harrow queries, understand that there's very little opportunity for kind of controversial statements to be said in the first place. And if you're working with the right people who are kind of seasoned in doing so, then even if something were to happen, there are steps you can take to mitigate the issue.
Yeah, it's not written in stone, so to speak, right? You can always reach back out. This is, a digital world. Articles can be updated. If for some reason you're uncomfortable with the way it comes out, you reach back out to the editor or the writer that you were in contact with in the first place, and they're another human. They understand these things. Thanks for that, Dan. I really appreciate that, because I think it's just a normal concern. I myself would have it, and it's something as service providers we have to think about our clients is, personal brands. They want to maintain their own work long after their relationship with us, if it ever were to end. So, okay. Something both of you said is something I like to share with people, and it ties back into, again, what Kimberly said. I agree with you, Dan. It's like, actually, these people are out there looking for us. That's the nature of what we're talking about here. So there's nothing, in my opinion, that should hold us back. But I'm always blown away. There are some people who I would call them overachievers. They set alarms to these opportunities being published every day, right? For me, the morning publication of Help a Reporter Out, for instance, comes out at 2:40 a.m. So I'm not waking up for that. But what is your all's take on the early bird gets the worm, trying to get these as soon as they're released?
Yeah, Kimberly, do you want to start with that one? I'm interested in hearing what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, I'm on the East Coast, so the early one is pretty easy for me to hit. And I usually look at it before I wake up my kids, have a hit list of the numbers I want to answer, drop my kids off, and then come back and answer the ones I want to answer. But I would also say, I believe if you answer first, because some of them are getting, they're getting hundreds plus answers, depending on what the topic is and kind of how sexy the topic is at the time, like narcissism's been a real big thing since, the Orange Lunatic. So like there was a lot of articles about that for a while, right? So anyway, like I would say, yes, answer quickly, but also, I mean, I have a little bit of a different take in the sense of answer it, but I want the 300 level answer. I don't want the 101 answer, because everyone and their mother's going to give that one. And honestly, in my opinion, if I have a controversial opinion, I will say it in the first line, because they want clicks. Like the articles, they want clicks and they want something different, So I got picked up to say, something they were like, we want to know about self-esteem. And I like literally started the answer saying, I completely understand why you're asking about that, but like most therapists know, self-esteem is made up, and what you want to talk about is self-compassion, and this is why, and blah 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 blah. Or like I'll write something like, this is the one thing other people won't tell you about this, like what would you say to a friend after 2 drinks? Like what's your uncensored version of that, and answer it that way, because everybody else is probably a little stiff. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from journalism like that, just because of authenticity. I would also say, like, and I would assume this would work when you are writing for other companies, right? Like if there are certain things I say to clients all the time, like in intakes or on a certain subject, or if there's certain like interventions I teach them all the time, I got that list there, right? And it's right there next to me, so I can plug it in to any answer I'm giving. And I would assume if I was having somebody else write something, like, for example, I do a lot on people who are recovering from relationships with narcissists, right? Like I have a bunch of phrases, I constantly use with people on like, your normal, like 101, I feel statements, that you get from Dr. Phil, you're going to get slaughtered if you use with a narcissist, please don't do that. Right. And like I have other techniques on how you do communications with that. And so I can plug that in anywhere. Right. And I would assume if, you're writing for a company and there's certain things they know, certain things they're telling their clients all the time, certain messages they always want to get out, I would assume you could give that to a writer and say, if you see an opportunity, plug it in, and then that'll keep you on brand, if that makes sense.
What I find most interesting about what you just said is the differences that you can often find from niche to niche. Mm-hmm. So in kind of the health sector, which I think you're writing in, psychotherapy and things like that, mm-hmm. You benefit more from these, I don't want to say clickbaity, but these controversial statements that you can make, because like you said, they really attract clicks. Whereas if you're writing on more of a business side of things or marketing, where things are a little bit more, I don't know, objective or something of that nature, the strategy changes a bit. So there is something to be said about the context of your company in terms of your writing style. As for actually when to pitch, in my opinion, I've been thinking about this today, and I happened upon kind of a conclusion, because Greg and I are actually conducting an experiment right now in terms of when the best time to pitch a query actually is, whether the beginning of when it comes out or just before the deadline. And the findings aren't in yet, but stay tuned for that. What I believe to be the most effective approach is either right at the beginning or right near the end, either of the two. Just don't get lost in the herd in the
Right, because
middle.
you're most likely to be seen either in the beginning or the end.
That's exactly right.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So if you happen to come across a query, let's say you missed a boat by like 12 hours, schedule it to be sent 5 minutes before the deadline. And that's probably a better shot at getting you placed, versus just sending it immediately and hoping for the best. That's my personal opinion. Outside of that, I tend to pitch as early as possible whenever I can. Just because, like you said, the frequency of what these journalists are receiving is ridiculous. When I've sent a query on Harrow, it's not uncommon to receive 250 responses. Their eyes glaze over at a certain point, and they might even finish the article by the point that you're actually writing the pitch. So you do have to be tactical about it.
Yeah, tactical. You used the word compassion earlier, Kimberly. I like to remind people, these are humans on the other end. And even if you don't want to be compassionate, it's at least good to put yourself in their shoes. Think about, you see 250 emails in your inbox, it has an impact on you. You're not going to read every single one probably. So cool. I really appreciate both of your insights. I just want to give Kimberly one last chance, if you would tell people where they could find you. I didn't spell it out, so let me be clear. If anyone's watching this and is thinking, how can I do it for myself? That's why we brought Kimberly here today, and I hope we can do this again, Kimberly, because Kimberly is now using her experience and offering coaching to teach you in a couple-hour session to do this yourself. What was the number you said you did in 10 months?
I think I have about 150 to 130 in about like 10 months.
And we're not talking about, just to be super clear what we're talking about, Kimberly's getting herself mentioned in the publications that in SEO land people would be clamoring for and trying to pay for, which is like, this isn't how it's done. It's done by giving your time.
Yeah. And I would also say another thing, just to jump on what Dan was talking about with the idea of, their eyes are going to glaze over. That's why if I know I have something different to say, or if I'm looking at the questions, I've answered all the questions, but I might start off with, hi, here's one question you might want to ask. Here it is. And here's your answer. Like, just because sometimes, when you read an article, you're like, oh, wow, man, you did not think about blank in this article. You know what I mean? So when I'm reading the questions, I try to give them something that's different, because I think that just sort of makes it more sexy to them. And then they want to use me, because I'm kind of giving them the next step that they might not have thought of, and I always put a disclaimer. If you find that not interesting, that's fine. Here's the answers to all your questions. You know what I mean? But usually they'll pick it up just because it gives them one more step that they don't have to work through and ask another bunch of people about,
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I find that, the reason that's so applicable is because, especially for newer writers, when they see a query, they are taking that very, very literally. If it's asking 8 questions, they'll probably answer all 8 questions. They won't want to deviate for fear of doing something wrong. But you do have a bit more leeway. Like we keep saying, these people are humans on the other end. You can introduce new ideas. You can elaborate on the ones they've already put forward. You can actually take that pitch in your own direction, as thoroughly or as concisely as you like.
That's right. I think people may be curious to know, the way our quotes are used in this tactic, sometimes they're inserted a sentence inside a paragraph that was written by the journalist or marketer. Sometimes they'll build a whole H2, we would say, in formatting terms, but a whole section of an article around your quote.
Yep.
It could be a whole new idea you've given them. Sometimes you can tell from the way they've shaped their query, they just want exactly this. I love that you do both. I actually, that's astounding. That's probably, again, the difference between running a team and doing it yourself, because you've got it all, and that if you do it right, you're going to get the results. Whereas Dan, I think you said it right. You're new to executing a service, and maybe you're interpreting things literally. For instance, on the timing, I told our team, I happen to always pitch up later. So found out several months later, half the team thought you have to pitch late. And it's like, that's the way to do it. That's it for me. That's why you two are here on the webinar. So thank you so much for both of your time. I really appreciate this.